Throughout its long history, our Earth has been inhabited by life forms totally different from each other. Some of them looked like fantasy creatures incarnate, while others would appear more or less usual to us. Dinosaurs were undoubtedly the most well-known and impressive creatures of the past, of course. They dominated the Earth's biosphere for as long as 145 million years, giving rise to countless species and forms. However, about 66 million years ago, our planet changed its inhabitants yet again. As a result of a global disaster, whose details are still quite obscure now, practically all animals weighing over 25 kilograms were wiped off the face of the Earth within an extremely short period by geological standards. The vacated expanses were promptly taken over by new dwellers. Mammals. In the course of the incessant struggle for survival, there evolved more and more new species until a unique creature appeared on the scene. Instead of adapting to relentless nature, it decided to rather adapt nature to its needs. This wasn't the biggest, strongest or fastest creature either. But how come it became the king of all nature? The Cretaceous-Paleogene mass extinction event heralded the beginning of a new geological era, the Cenozoic. Having started 66 million years ago, it is still going on. In the course of all this period, the Earth's surface underwent global transformations and offered its expanses to a great multitude of amazing creatures. The first period of the new era was dubbed the Paleogene. It started immediately after the disaster that wiped off dinosaurs and lasted for 43 million years. Our planet's appearance dramatically changed in this time. India crossed the ocean and virtually rammed into the south coast of Asia. The Himalayas rose their peaks up to the heavens, and the Antarctic began to grow its vast ice shield. In the first 10 million years, the Earth's biosphere was recovering from the fateful blow. With the old masters gone, agile and viable animals, mammals, quickly spread across the ecological niches vacated by them. Looking for new forms, life evolved and produced the Duo Andrewsarchus, the giant and rigid Indricotherium, and the aquatic Archaeoceti, the prehistoric ancestors of today's whales. Many of these fascinating creatures vanished without a trace, while others evolved to adapt to the changeable conditions. About 23 million years ago, the Paleogene was succeeded by the Neogene, which lasted around 20 million years. It is divided into two unequal epochs, the longer one of which is called the Miocene. This was a time of unhurried and consistent cooling. Ice caps on the Earth gradually grew while the climate became cooler and drier. The global sea level was falling, and mountain ridges like the Alps and the Andes, on the contrary, were rising higher. As a result of this process, the Mediterranean Sea was cut off from the global ocean and almost dried up. In its place, there remained vast lowlands covered by salty desert. According to some estimates, temperature in some of its areas reached 80 degrees Celsius, while the atmospheric pressure at the bottom of this basin was over 1.5 times the value of what we're used to. Just a few small lakes with extremely salty water were scattered across the bleak, lifeless desert. In that epoch, the vast expanses of our planet were home to a great number of bizarre creatures. Gigantopithecus, an enormous man-like ape related to orangutans, over 3 meters in height and with a body mass of up to half a ton, forced its way through dense Asian rainforests. Entelodon, an ungulate predator and scavenger the size of a bull, terrified steppe dwellers. As for the ocean, its depths were dominated by Megalodon, the largest carnivorous shark in the history of the Earth. Slightly over 5 million years ago, the area which is now known as Gibraltar was stunned by a tremendous earthquake. The rocky dam that had separated the Mediterranean Sea from the Atlantic Ocean for hundreds of thousands of years finally gave way, and millions of tons of water gushed into the gigantic lifeless lowlands. According to estimates, the force of the flow was 40,000 times that of the Niagara Falls, and it took only 2 years for the sea to fill up again. At the same time, thousands of tons of salt were buried under layers of sand and rock of remarkable thickness, and that's where it remains to this day. This tremendous event, dubbed the Zanclean Flood, is considered to be the beginning of the Pliocene epoch that was to last for 2,745,000 years. By that time, the continents had drifted to stay in the places we're used to seeing them, but some relief features were just starting to form. For example, North and South America was still separated by a wide strait at the beginning of the epoch, and the Rocky Mountains were just starting to grow. The Earth's climate in the first half of the Pliocene was comparatively warm. Our planet's average temperature was 2 to 3 degrees higher than it is now, although these extra degrees were not distributed across the planet evenly. The climate in the tropical latitudes resembled that of today, but northern areas were much warmer. The Arctic was not covered in ice permanently, and dense conifer forests reached the northernmost areas of Eurasia. Still, it should be borne in mind that the continent's border used to lie slightly more to the south than it does now, because the sea level at the time was on average 25 meters higher than today, on account of the higher temperature. Meanwhile, today's humans' first ancestors inhabited the African continent: Ardipithecus, Sahelanthropus, and Ororin. The unearthed remains of these ancient primates date 4 to 6 million years back. Their body build is still very far from that of humans. There is no doubt that these creatures were advanced apes rather than humans, but still they had taken the first step in evolution of a new life. Features of their discovered skeletons reveal a tendency to developing an upright posture, even though tree-climbing habits manifested themselves very clearly still. As for these creatures' cranial capacity, it was bigger than that of chimpanzees, and the teeth structure was similar to that of later species. What was it that forced the ancient primates to change so much? A possible reason could be that approximately 3 million years ago, the continental plains of North and South America collided and caused a rapid rise of rocks. The strait between the two continents was cut off by the Isthmus of Panama, which blocked the passage of warm ocean waters. At around the same time, the Rocky Mountains considerably gained in height, thus forming a barrier between the Atlantic and the Pacific air currents. With all these factors combined, the Earth gradually cooled and some parts of it grew to be icebound. The North Pole was gripped with an ice shield. Greenland started to build up tons of ice cap, while the areas of African forests shrank, giving way to steppes and savannas. Treetops make great habitats. They're safe and comfortable and provide one with plenty of food. This is what ancient primates agreed on. They adapted to the tree-climbing lifestyle extremely well. However, the global climate change eliminated the greater part of the African forests. Thousands of species lost the habitats they were used to, and so many of them vanished off the face of the earth. Others were forced to adapt to survive in the new conditions. Today, the Savannah concept is the most developed and well-grounded hypothesis of anthropogenesis. According to this concept, the deficit of their usual food and lack of woods forced our ancestors out into the savannah, riddled with unknown dangers. By this time, they were already capable of moving around on 2 legs and using primitive tools, just like all man-like apes. These skills were vital for survival in the new conditions. Easily digestible fruit and plants were sparse in the savannah, and rough grass and leaves were inedible for the primates. Tapping into animal sources of food became key to survival. However, one is supposed to be fast and strong to hunt successfully, and this is what our ancestors lacked. Only developing an upright posture could give them the necessary edge in these circumstances. upright walking not only increased the speed of movement, but also allowed sighting both potential game and danger from far off. When the body is in the vertical position, strong hands with prehensile fingers are free, so a stick or a sharpened stone can be used much easier. By forming small tribes, the new inhabitants of the savannah could hunt, or at the very least take the kill of other predators away from them by force. It is assumed that the necessity to coordinate actions in the process stimulated the development of the brain and primitive speech. Gradual evolution in the course of several million years endowed the ape-like Ardipithecus and Sahelanthropus with human features. That's how Australopithecus came to be. This agile, smart but not very big creature appeared on the territory of Africa in the period from 4.2 to 1.8 million years ago. Analysis of their fossilized remains revealed them to have been 120 to 140 centimeters in height and to have weighed around 40 kilograms. Unlike other primates, Australopithecus moved around primarily on two legs, although its posture remained stooped. As for its brain, even though it was larger than that of human-like apes, the differences in its inner makeup were minuscule. It is known that Australopiths lived in tribes and could cooperate for hunting and fighting enemies. Research shows that early species used only objects close at hand, while later ones learned to make the most basic and primitive tools to work and defend themselves with. In spite of all that, most individuals didn't live to be older than 20 because of illnesses, injuries, and wild animals' attacks. Apparently, the predators of that time saw Australopiths exclusively as a food source. Back then, Dinosaurs was around, a large saber-toothed cat distantly related to Smilodentini, which were to emerge later. Diggings reveal that it preferred living not far from Australopiths' camps. It clearly saw them as easy prey. Slightly larger than today's leopards, Dinosaurs was more thick-set and more powerfully built. With their weight reaching 120 kilograms, these predators were around 70 centimeters tall. It is next to impossible to fight this kind of animal single-handed, and probably the beast could be driven away by our ancestors only by joint effort. Of course, Dinosaurs hunted not only Australopiths. Antelopes or wild boars, for example, were also part of its diet. Most animals inhabiting the Earth of that time resemble today's species. However, there were some real monsters among them too. For example, in North and South America, there lived several species of flightless predatory birds of the Forest-Rockidae family, whose largest individuals reached 3 meters in height. Their skulls measured as much as 75 centimeters, with a powerful beak accounting for most of it. Thanks to their rangier legs, the birds were able to develop great speeds. Fortunately, mankind didn't have to face these monsters, as the Forest-Rockids died out completely around 100,000 years ago, much earlier than America's first ancient tribes had settled there. The Asian jungles, meanwhile, were home to another giant, an elephant-like beast Dinotherium, whose mass reached 14 tons and whose height measured 3.5 to 4.5 meters. Of all land mammals ever to tread the surface of our planet, only Indracotherium and mammoths were larger. These distant relatives of elephants are thought to have inhabited the forests of Asia and Africa, subsisting mainly on tree foliage. Their trunks were probably shorter and thicker than those of the elephant, and the most outstanding feature in their appearance is their long, massive tusks protruding from the mandible. 2,588,000 years ago, a tremendous event occurred which got the name of the Gauss-Matuyama reversal. The Earth's magnetic poles swapped places, and all the magnetic lines changed their directions. The transformation was accompanied by a weakening of the planet's magnetic field, which decreased by 4 times. This means that cosmic rays, lethal to all living things, could now reach the Earth's surface. And even though this phenomenon was around for just approximately 15,000 years, which is negligible by geological standards, it caused several species to massively die out. This magnetic reversal is seen as a milestone marking the beginning of a new geological period, the Quaternary. It is divided into two epochs, the first of which is called the Pleistocene. It started 2,588,000 years ago and finished just 12,000 years ago. Periodic cooling accompanied by the growth of ice caps was typical for the climate of that time. In between ice ages, temperatures grew and ice caps melted, which made the sea level to rise. These frequent fluctuations in the climate forced living things to adapt to these changes quickly and stimulated the process of evolution. Gradually evolving, Australopiths gave rise to two large branches of primates, Paranthropus, an extinct genus today, and Homo, among others represented by today's humans. However, the three branches coexisted for a considerably long time in the competitive conditions of a struggle for survival. The evolutionary way from higher primates to humans was not straight and clear-cut. There were plenty of dead ends and forks. At least 24 different species roamed our planet at different times, whose representatives could be referred to as humans to this or that degree. The evolutionary process of humans and our ancestors is always paid a lot of attention to, and details are constantly being updated. It should be borne in mind that evolution is a very slow process. At least 2 to 3 million years is needed for species to completely part their ways and interbreed to give rise to viable hybrids. Meanwhile, the entire history of the Homo, the genus including today's human species, amounts to around 2.5 million years. With our most ancient ancestors taken into account, this figure can be pretty much doubled. Also, many populations inhabited neighboring areas, which means that there were probably quite a lot of hybrids out there in the natural world. It should also be borne in mind that interspecies variation in humans is quite high. There are noticeable differences between men and women, and people of different races also demonstrate clearly diverse features. It is thought that ancient species divided into races as well, some of which may erroneously have been classified as separate species by scientists. New archaeological finds help to correct these errors and supply important details to our knowledge. In spite of all their progressive features, Australopiths were apes to a greater degree than they were humans. The first universally recognized representative of the human species was the so-called Homo habilis, or handyman. Diggings show that handyman lived on the territory of Africa in the period from 2.3 to 1.5 million years ago. It had a more developed brain than Australopithecus and was able to make primitive labor tools. The height of this species' individuals was around 1.2 meters, with a mass likely to be 50 kilos or less. Interestingly, it was the first creature whose big toe was located in one row with the other toes, as is the case with today's humans. This could be seen as evidence of complete adaptation to an upright posture. Another important parameter was the structure of the jaws, which could indicate a gradually developing ability to produce articulate speech. Later, evolution produced Homo ergaster, or working man, about 2 million years ago, and Homo erectus, or upright man. Different scientists classify them either as close evolutionary branches or as subspecies of one species. In the course of migrations, these representatives of the human race settled on the territories of Africa, Asia, and Europe, which stimulated numerous evolutionary branches. One of them eventually produced Homo sapiens. Ancient people, whether Neanderthals or Homo sapiens, lived in tribes and practiced a nomadic lifestyle. Living by gathering and hunting, they were forced to constantly migrate and move to new unexplored areas. In this manner, primitive tribes gradually settled all over the continents except the Antarctica. Around 50,000 years ago, exploration of Australia began, and about 24,000 years ago, people reached North America for the first time via the Bering Isthmus. The spread of primitive tribes across the globe coincided with mass extinctions of the megafauna in the Pleistocene. In the period from 50,000 to 10,000 years ago, mammoths and giant sloth Megatherium vanished off the face of the planet, followed by saber-toothed cats and other predators who were unable to keep up the fierce competition for food. Perhaps humans would have met the same fate, but around 12,000 years ago, an ice age came to its end and our planet's climate became warmer and more humid. The fertile valleys of Mesopotamia and the Nile's estuary allowed our ancestors to lead a non-migratory gathering lifestyle, and later to form fully fledged agricultural communities after the so-called Neolithic Revolution. That was the end of the Pleistocene, which heralded a new epoch in the history of our planet. The Holocene was a time of robust growth of the human civilization, technical and social progress, destructive wars and ecological disasters. By choosing a unique path of evolution, man made first steps on completely new and unexplored territories beyond our planet. Only time will show what this path will lead to. Dear friends, the topic of the genesis of man is still full of unsolved mysteries and secrets. If you have anything to say about it, feel free to share your opinion in the comments. Your active participation means a lot to us, because we put our heart in every new episode and try to make each one interesting and informative. We're always happy to get likes and positive comments from you. This motivates us to make new videos faster. Let's keep in touch.